At some point, every guy has wanted to be a super soldier who's so fit they can defy the laws of physics.
Okay, that was pretty cool.
To have all their fantasy girls fall in love with them, from the fun, flirty actress to the manic pixie flower girl. Or their childhood friend, who's really their dream girl and motivates them to go out and get stronger and is the best girl ever. And if any of you think that Aerith is better than Tifa, you're wrong and you smell and I hate you and you're ruining my fantasy!
Is Tifa like your girlfriend?
No.
We're talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake today. I've played every numbered Final Fantasy game that isn't an MMO, and I love the series. I also completely understand why others don't. Turn-based combat isn't for everyone. Final Fantasy is a series you play for the plot. And not that kind of plot. Like, actually for the plot. It's like Shakespeare, if Shakespeare was performed by children in a god-awful school play. Great story and themes, horrible execution. If you're not into the series, don't worry, I won't try and sell you on the story, but I will say the soundtrack is one of the best ever. Instead, get ready to run like a chocobo and stab like a tonberry, because on today's episode of GBU Reviews, we're going over Remake's amazing combat and how the ability system is the best teacher. And as per usual, we'll talk about the ugly back-of-the-napkin changes I'd have made if I had been part of the team. Remake's combat system is the perfect balance between depth and complexity, but what I love most about it is the upgrade system that Square Enix tied to the game's weapons. To explain why this system is so good, I want to start by exploring a concept called FOO strategies. FOO stands for First Order Optimal. It's a fancy way of saying targeted button mashing. A FOO strategy is an easy to execute and highly rewarding strategy, like E Honda's 100-hand slap in Street Fighter, or mass-producing war carts as Gilgamesh in Civilization 6. It's typically the first strategy new players will learn that makes them feel like they've broken the game. And as a designer, we want to try and guide players to discover these techniques without forcing them to it with a tutorial, because the moment of discovery makes you feel like an unstoppable god.
You will always kneel.
And in PvP games, it also lets you style on your casual friends.
You see this? You see what I'm doing? Not even looking.
And that's pretty empowering. On the flip side, you'll almost never see veteran players use FOO strategies, because as good as they are, there are better options. And for veteran players, the increased complexity to pull off these more difficult options isn't as daunting as it would be for new players. The hard part of crafting a learning curve as a designer is navigating players through the delicate balance in that transition. A FOO strategy needs to be effective to hook players into the game and make them feel powerful. But as designers, we need to wean you off of it quickly for a few reasons. If a FOO strategy is overpowered, the combat will start to feel repetitive, like a grind rather than a fun challenge. And the last thing designers want is their players going,
"You're boring! You're fucking boring, Steve! And the only thing keeping us together is inertia!"
We've all forced ourselves to finish a game after the point where it was fun. And it sucks because our opinion of the game drops pretty heavily once boredom sets in. Another option is that players become dependent on their FOO strategy, ignoring all of the other tools that we're trying to teach them. Then when a challenge appears that they can't beat, they're stuck crying about the balance being stupid or the difficulty curve being insane, because it can't be that they suck.
You're a pimp!
When those players hit the wall, they're pretty likely to stop playing. The realization that you're not good at a game hits even harder in PvP games, because designers can't fine-tune the experience. There are so many factors that go into matchmaking that could lead to uneven games. So as players learn the ropes, we need to balance the learning curve very delicately. We need to rely on FOO strategies to make players feel powerful and get invested in the early game, but we also need to find ways of teaching players to use more tools in their arsenal so they can grow. It can be as simple as giving an enemy a shield so they can't be hit with the standard button mashing. It often takes just a very subtle touch to show players their old techniques won't work later in the game.
No, you're cheating. You're gonna learn! This is the real world! You learn it early, son!
So how does this all relate to Final Fantasy VII Remake? Well, as a story-driven game, Remake's combat could have been simple. I played the original with combat like this only 2 years ago, and I still loved it. So when I saw how good Remake's combat was, I knew I had to talk about it. And the best part of the combat is how unique each character feels. Early in the game, spamming the attack button and randomly casting abilities makes you feel incredibly powerful, and you can get away with it for most of the game on the normal difficulty. But to help teach players to break out of their button mashing and to really appreciate the differences in the characters and their combos, Remake forces you to demonstrate your mastery of an ability to unlock it permanently. I know that might sound confusing, so let's go through my favorite example, the nail bat. I hate using this weapon, but it's beautifully designed. It's slow and it can't equip materia, so you're forced to rely on attacks and skills. Cloud's unique gameplay is the ability to change between two stances. One fast where you can dodge roll, and one powerful where you can counter. The Nail Bat's special ability allows you to change between these two stances while attacking. If you prove that you know how to use this ability, you'll unlock it and be able to use it regardless of the weapon you equip to Cloud.
It's mine. My own. My precious.
Precious?
What makes this system great at teaching is that as players show they understand how an ability works, they expand their character's arsenal. The Nail Bat as a weapon is so slow in its heavy stance that you'll almost never land the attack on an enemy that isn't staggered. So with its ability to swap stances and carry the momentum into an attack, the game is teaching you to swap into the heavy stance when enemies are staggered. It's showing you how to use Cloud effectively, and the proficiency system means you're only learning skills for characters if you prove you can use them.
Are you worthy? I am.
Aerith has skills that help her cast, like an area of effect she places on the ground, which makes spells trigger twice if cast within the area. Tifa powers herself up and then unleashes crazy combos that specialize in building an enemy's stagger. Barrett fights from a range and has abilities to help his team's survivability. And as you unlock access to more abilities, you'll start pulling off combos that make the characters and combat shine in ways that it just can't in the early game.
Oh yeah. It's all coming together.
And while you can technically button mash your way through the proficiency challenges, it's a subtle guiding hand towards really understanding how each character works, helping you go from this to this. Which is something you really need if you intend to take on the game's hard mode. There's a lot of things I could say in the bad section of this review. Plenty of missions and story elements drag on long past their welcome. I'm looking at you, Train Graveyard. Then, on subsequent playthroughs, it can definitely be annoying watching Aerith greet everyone in Sector 5, because instead of doing it in a cutscene, it's done in gameplay, which means we're stuck walking next to her as everyone tells us how great she is, including Aerith herself.
Since I'm so generous.
Oh, I'm humble. Thanks, super modest about it, thank you. Oh, pray hands, pray hands.
There's also a lot of hold-up gameplay that doesn't help build the world or the tone.
Get out of there right now!
All right, let me grab my... What the hell is that thing?
I could even complain about how the achievements ask you to unlock all of the dresses for Cloud and the girls, but doesn't give you any hint as to which you've already earned, so you have to track it yourself. But I'd like to focus on something different.
Alright, let me tell you something! Let me tell you something!
I say, having already complained about those things very quickly. And I can't spend the entire episode talking about why Tifa is better than Aerith, since the game really goes out of its way to paint her as a saint. She helps everyone in town and volunteers at the orphanage, so anything bad I say about her makes me feel like I'm going.
I'm sick of hearing about your stupid orphans. What did you just say? I hate orphans.
When doing these reviews, I look for themes to build an episode around. So since I spoke so highly of the combat system, it's time to dissect the part of it that doesn't work for me. And that's the brain-dead companions. The characters in Remake are all amazing, with unique playstyles, yet the second you stop controlling them, they'll spend their time blocking and staring at a wall. It's gotta be some next level martial arts stuff that I just don't get.
And when there is an opportunity, I do not hit.
What do you mean by that?
It doesn't really help sell the fantasy of being the awesome eco-terrorists we know from the original game. What's worse is that the main way for a character to gain their meter to use special skills is by attacking. So the incompetence of the AI actually results in a pretty heavy DPS loss. Next, while the characters can function on their own, the game comes alive when they work together. It's all about the power of friendship. Final Fantasy has taught us that lesson so many times. But the limits of the AI filling their meter means that executing combos between party members is harder than it needs to be. And it can feel jarring having to enter command mode to give the AI some direction, especially when you've gotten into the flow of combat with your own character. Overall, it's a minor complaint, because the individual characters are engaging enough to carry the combat, and you don't need to worry about maxing out synergies unless you're on hard mode. There are even a few attempts to mitigate the combo issue. For example, the synergy materia will allow allies to follow up your spellcasts with one of their own. They aren't smart enough to seek out Aerith's double cast zone when they do, but it's at least some ability to combo with the AI. The DLC with Yuffie takes comboing with allies to the next level by letting you pair up with Sonon to unleash some duo attacks. I really hope we see more combos and synergies in part 2 of the remake. So how would I have changed Remake's combat if I was part of the dev team? I'd start by helping the AI.
And you, lad, all you need is a brain. Why does everyone keep saying that?
As fun as it is to combo with Sonon in Yuffie's DLC, it's just not the same as having effective teammates. And the pairing system works in the DLC because you're always in the same team of 2 characters, where the player is the damage dealer and Sonon is the support.
Remake and Barbacle.
In the main game, and in the upcoming part 2, you're in larger parties, and the characters can fill more varied roles based on how you choose to equip them. So jumping into a stance where you control multiple characters at a time isn't realistic. So while this video was being edited, Remake Part 2 got a trailer. I didn't think they were gonna add combo attacks for all the characters because that sounded like way too much work, but holy shit if that's not exactly what they showed in the trailer. That might solve some of the problems with the AI since you'll be able to control them. But we'll see how smart they are when you aren't holding their hand. Anyways, I just wanted to pop in and say how excited I am for part 2. What could be realistic is to give the AI basic instructions on how they should behave. A lot of RPGs have already started using systems like this. Final Fantasy XII had its Gambit system, where players had so much control, they could put down the controller and let the characters run around and farm XP on their own.
So, I guess this means you don't need me anymore.
I wouldn't want to go that crazy, because we still want players to have to play the game. There needs to be some skill expression, but your allies should at least spend more time attacking. Only block if an enemy is targeting them, and if their ATB is full, then they'd run simple logic to use a skill. The player could define what that logic is and which abilities they use. Could be something as easy as heal allies that are below 50% HP, casting a very specific ability on a staggered foe, looking to abuse elemental advantages that they have. Just do something so they aren't sitting on a full bar preventing themselves from generating more ATB. Then hopefully the AI would also be smart enough to analyze the battlefield. If they're close to one of Aerith's double cast zones, they should move into it before casting their spells. Nothing so complex as to make the game play itself, but just enough to make sure that your allies feel like they're trying to help you win the fight instead of just watching you do it.
Help me! Help me!
That's really all I want to see from the next part of the Remake trilogy. I know a lot of people have made comments about the story, but I'm actually interested in seeing what they change. I thought the idea of the Whispers was awesome. For those who haven't played yet, in Remake, anytime the story deviates from the original game, these ghosts show up and force it to happen the way it's supposed to, but you end up killing these guys in the end. I think it's a good idea to change up the story, because if I wanted to just play Final Fantasy VII, I'd play the original. It still holds up today, and I like that the devs are fleshing out the world, even if not all of it lands for me. Like Roach, I don't like him, but in the original Final Fantasy VII, we didn't see any other soldiers besides Zack and Sephiroth. So adding a soldier dying of boredom because there's no one to fight leads to some world building that I enjoy.
I like it.
And it isn't the only new story. Jesse's backstory is amazing. as are Yuffie's DLC chapters. And there's been plenty of fan theories circulating about some of the other changes Remake has made. My particular favorite one is that the Sephiroth we see in Remake is actually the one from the original game who has somehow time traveled back after seeing that he loses the fight. And that's why he leads you to defeating the Arbiters of Fate, and he knows who Cloud is this early in the story. As a fan of Final Fantasy, I'm really excited to see what comes next. Of course, if Tifa dies, I will instantly change my mind about any and all story changes being a good idea and write an angry letter to Square Enix. So in a long-winded way, I guess what I'm saying is, I'm still undecided on the Remake trilogy.
Nailed it. I know. Thank you. Moving on.